ganglia. Basal ganglia is interesting. Why? Because it actually has a lot of gray matter. It's actually connecting to the hemispheres. It connects to the red nucleus that we talked about earlier, the substantia nigra that we talked about earlier, the subthalamus that we talked about earlier. But what does it do? It gets a lot of information in and out. It also controls a lot of skeletal muscle activity. This is the thing that we talked about which actually affects Parkinson's, where there's an abnormality, where it is uncontrollable, where a lot of times what we do, because the dopamine is not at the controlled levels, so what happens is it doesn't inhibit the correct muscle activity when it needed, okay? So what does it look like? It's basically right in this area. It's made up of and you have different parts. So we have the caudate nucleus, which is where we have different portions of it which connect to that's linked to the basal ganglia, and the substantia nigra, it's basically involved in muscular movements, okay? Like I said, Parkinson's is where we actually see problems with this, where it actually creates tremors, it creates, irregular muscle activity. And you can see this at times where you see individuals like this, unfortunately. And I want you to realize the one proponent of influence to try to get funding for this type of research for Parkinson's, Michael J. Fox. Okay. Also, the basal ganglia is one of those areas where we actually have a lot of cognitive occurrences. This is where a lot of the psychosis is actually related to, like schizophrenia, things like that. Obsessive compulsive disorders. Anybody that's obsessive compulsive? Okay. But it's the basal ganglia where we actually see this effect area, where there's connections that aren't exactly working the way they should normally. This also connects with the limbic system. You guys don't know anything about the limbic system? Yes or no? Okay, let's talk about the limbic system. This is really interesting stuff. Limbic system, basically, we have a whole bunch of areas, including the amygdala, which you hear about in psychology. The psychologists like to talk about the amygdala. Yeah. But it also connects with the olfactory bulb and the thalamus and other areas. This is where we actually get emotions and behaviors and memories of emotions. Not only that, this is where we get pleasure and pain centers. This is also where, if you actually look at, a lot of people can also have mixing up the pleasure with pain. So when you're actually seeing individuals that have
masochism.
What's that?
Masochism.
Masochism, yes. They actually
cutters, like people do as non-serious self-injury.
Yes.
What
They
about
actually
sadists?
derive pleasure from pain. Okay?
Is that the same thing with sadists?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
that?
And a lot of it, you don't realize it, but a lot of it actually is where they get desensitized to it, and then it actually becomes something that they derive pleasure from it. There are people that I've come in contact with that, well, they like tattoos. And I mean, not just one, but they keep getting their whole body tattooed, and they can't wait until they get another tattoo. That type of occurrence.
But that's just more being like addictive, not like because of pain.
No, but it actually stimulates the receptors that then trigger that opioid type pleasure from it. And I knew somebody, he had his whole arms tattooed, he had his back tattooed, his chest, he couldn't wait until he got another one, all the time. And part of the problem with him was, he used to do plumbing, and he used to do plumbing for a tattoo artist, and basically he did the plumbing work in exchange for tattoos. So, yeah, so that was his thing. Okay. But you also have people that do other things, not just tattoos. We're talking about, people that like to have extreme piercings also. And like I said, I had a student that did piercings for a living, and he had a portfolio they brought with him wherever he went, which showed step-by-step stages of piercings that he did. And I mean, I talked to you guys about the one where the guy had an eyeball on his tongue. Or that's how big the piercing was on his tongue. But he also did he had a whole series of pictures for, what was it called? Prince Albert? Is that it? Prince Albert?
The piercing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're talking about 30 piercings on the genitals of a male. 30. 30 piercings
That's not Prince
in the
Albert,
genitals.
that's just wrong.
30 on a male. And,
How?
but apparently that individual, that's
Where?
what he wanted. Why? I have no idea, but
Is it wrong to have a sick curiosity about it now?
What's that?
Is it wrong to have a sick curiosity about how? Just, hey, aren't you curious?
Not
Like if you had a
really.
chance to see it. 30
had
piercings.
staged-
30
he had-
piercing.
But he had step-by-step pictures of the whole series of how it was accomplished in his portfolio. Okay. But then again, he went to conventions and things like that were related to piercings and tattoos. To show his abilities, of doing these.
You want to see it?
But that's one of the things that you might notice, that people that actually may have these, where they get, these types of things. Pleasure from pain, say that, whatever that
Might
means. in
discuss
their
it.
situation. Okay? What's that?
Must be a shower.
So, where do we see it? Basically, we have the limbic system, right in this area, okay? Where we actually see the different parts, okay? But I do want you to realize that emotions are a memory. I do want you to realize that. So it's not just, and I do want you to also realize that strong emotions provide more of a memory of a situation. Not everybody realizes that. So major events that you may be exposed to may actually indicate something that becomes a memory that you can recall. Okay, for whatever reason. Anyway, we can also get some injuries. You guys ever get injured on the brain?
On the brain?
On the brain, yes. Have you ever had a brain injury? Yes. I do want you to realize that brain injuries are basically because of something happened, okay? Could be chemical, it could be infectious, it could be something that happened from physical trauma. So one of the things that we do is, a lot of times we can actually get the brain injury from concussions, contusions, and lacerations.
Ooh.
These are more
Oh
of,
my.
what we actually see. And I want you to realize that you guys drive,
Yeah.
okay? When you drive, there's always that possibility of something happening. That's why we wear seatbelts, okay? And I want you to realize that a lot of times brain injuries do happen in car accidents, very often. So it does occur. So concussions are the least injury, I'll say it that way, and lacerations are the worst. Just so you have an understanding. So when we actually look at these brain injuries, basically they will actually cause damage. Could cause intracranial pressure, could cause hemorrhaging, could cause some sort of ischemic event where we actually have a loss of oxygen. So when we do see concussions, you can have a loss of consciousness, temporarily. Headaches, drowsiness. This is one of the reasons that when you get a concussion, you try to keep the patient alert for a certain amount of time, so that if they pass out, they don't go into
Coma.
a coma.
What about short-term memory
Excuse me? I
What?
forgot what you- No, we're gonna get to memory and loss in that. Okay, so just let's look at the injuries first, okay?
So to what degree is the brain damaged with a concussion, or is it?
Well,
Not.
here's the thing. You can lose your concentration also, and I want you to realize that the concussion, like I said, is the least damage, okay? And you'll love this. I've had 2 concussions in my life. Ooh. How'd I get them? The last one I got, I basically slipped on the floor and hit my head on the bed. And I thought, that felt like that, okay? And it was just mild concussion. So that was not bad, but,
Thank the gods.
yeah. That was fortunate. And yeah, I did have some issues, but it wasn't long-term, okay? The first concussion, unfortunately, was when I was as an undergraduate. In the place I was working, some robbers came in and banged me over the head and gave me 12 stitches. Yes. And basically,
Where were you working, Camden?
no.
No, I don't know. I'm kind of curious now. Where you get?
No, if it was Camden, I would have been in the ground.
You would have been shot.
It's like, oh wait, you're still alive. Never mind.
Okay? I know, okay? So, but basically, something like that, it did cause losses.
So now let me ask you a question. Okay, you remember Mary Jo Buttafuoco?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I don't remember, I haven't met her, but I do.
Okay. So
Yeah,
she
sure.
has a bullet still lodged in
Yeah.
her brain. So even,
Yeah.
the husband's mistress shot her in the head.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they don't remember.
Oh, you don't, no, they don't.
They're young, yeah.
Yeah.
So now, she had a
Thank you.
partial
And by the way, no,
What?
no.
Well, he only served 6 months in jail. Can you
Yeah.
believe that?
I know,
He was
I know.
38 and the girl was 16. Yeah, the Long Island Lolita, Amy Fisher. She went up and shot the wife in the head.
Yeah.
It was all over the news.
Yeah.
It was in 91, 92. That was
What?
in grammar school.
What was this? Where was it?
That was one of the biggest,
What was this?
like 1991, 1992.
Long Island.
Oh, okay, yeah, I
I
was
wasn't
born.
even born yet.
Long
Oh
Island.
no, I wasn't around. I wasn't even on Earth yet. I'm good.
Yeah, I know, right? I wasn't even thought.
But reality is more
I wasn't even
strange
swimmer yet.
than stories.
Stories, yeah.
I'll say it that way.
So now she still has a bullet lodged in her head, and they said they can't take the bullet out because it's gonna nick an artery or something.
Yep.
Okay, so she, even though she's functioning well, is she still considered to have a TBI?
Somewhat,
Somewhat.
okay, because she may have adjusted and things like that. So,
Traumatic brain injury.
Right.
Yeah, then one side of her mouth is a
It's
paralyzed.
like that.
I mean, it's, like I said, damage to the brain, not repairable.
You guys gotta Google it, they made 3 movies out of it. NBC paid for the girl's bail. The mother sold the rights over, cause her bail was $2 million. They had
Damn.
no money to pay the bail. So NBC said, if you sell us the rights to your daughter's story, we'll bail her out of jail. They also, it was a big, they did it, yeah, cause the girl was a minor.
Well, keep in mind, I want you to realize, in business, efficacy is a questionability.
Every what?
Google it, the Long Island movie.
Efficacy is.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, see, I remember a lot of
I remember
stories.
that one. Because every wife is talking about it, like, it's bad enough your husband cheats on you, but then the mistress comes to your house and puts a gun to your head.
Well, look at it this way, I remember the one where the guy,
That's
he got
exactly-
shot. There was this guy that was, his
That's
wife was, she lived in New Hampshire, okay, New Hampshire, okay? She was a teacher in high school, I
I know
think.
which one you're talking about. She
And-
helped
and the
students. She
student-
slept with
and the
the student,
students
and the student
shot
was
their
the
husband.
That was a Lifetime movie. Pamela Smart, that was her name, yeah.
Pamela's?
Sorry, she got her high school students.
What's that?
She got her high school students that she taught, she got them to shoot her.
She had this one high school student, and him and his friend,
And then they got like $250, idiots,
Wow.
to shoot the husband.
Mhm.
Mhm.
yeah.
Life, children, that's just.
Yeah, 'cause she was sleeping with one of the students.
Yeah.
And
That's
he was
like-
a student, and he can't do
Shit
that.
happens.
That just happens.
That's why I don't watch the news that
That's
much.
like shit happens, mind
I'll
again.
tell you that much.
What?
This is
That's
just-
life,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
it's life,
life,
just
like,
life.
that's just life. That's just life, it just happens everywhere now.
Yeah.
That's not just, that's life.
Yeah.
There's a lot of shootings lately, remember the article they showed me today,
Yeah.
like, there was like 5 or 6, shootings over the weekend.
Yeah, I heard.
Again?
It's in Philly, right?
I heard
There was
something.
one in Philly, one in Philadelphia.
Wait, how far are we from finishing this chapter?
What's that?
How far are we from finishing this
I
chapter?
know, it's scary.
Wait a minute, I
We're
want
at
you to know how
15 out of
long.
50 slides?
15 out of 50?
Yep.
Fantastic, okay.
So,
When's the test again?
not tomorrow,
Not tomorrow?
we don't-
Not tomorrow, okay.
not tomorrow. We still have spinal cord.
Wait,
And we still have
Yeah,
labs. There's a
exactly.
whole PowerPoint for spinal cord?
Yeah,
Do you know how many slides?
no.
Nope.
Would you say it's over
That was,
30?
that was just like a
Probably.
key note over this.
Okay.
It's like we're going down this rabbit hole again.
So basically, one of the things that, like I said, the first time I had it, they also missed some spots. They could give me more stitches.
Oh my god.
You kept.
But Professor, you went through a lot.
I would, yes, I did.
Yeah, the experience that you
Yeah.
tell us, you've been through a lot.
I have. That's what happens a lot.
You're well lived.
You're well lived.
Yeah.
You went through so much.
Yeah.
You live or
But
you
that
don't.
time, the first concussion though,
That's
was
what I'm saying. He
more
said first, so there's
serious. I did have to go to a neurologist. They did prescribe me Percocet 500.
What'd you do this time?
Yeah. Yeah, you know.
What'd you do?
Yeah, so, what?
What'd you do?
Well, they gave me also sleeping medicine.
Yeah, but like,
Took
what'd
it
you
once
do?
and that was it. The Percocet just brought the pain down to a normal level function.
I didn't even know Percocet was up that high. I get like 10
Actually, it was
from the
Darkset,
dentist.
not
I'm
as, it was
sick.
Darkset. Okay, so,
Percocet makes me sick.
yeah, I, you know, but I didn't, I tried not to take it. Yeah, I know. I know. The last time I took it, I thought it was a pain, and it was actually a regular headache. And then I got. Mm-hmm. So you guys know what that means. So anyway, that's concussions. I did also, just in my experience, I was in school at the time, you know, so it was a part-time job while I was working, you know, in school. You know, I had to take it a little slower.
What happened to the guy who hit you?
I have no idea. I have my own thoughts. What I'd like him to, occur, but that's it. But, never caught, as far as I know. It was 2 guys.
Oh, okay.
One had a sawed-off shotgun, the other had a handgun.
All things
Where
considered, you
were
got off
you?
lucky.
What's that?
All things considered, you got off lucky.
Yeah.
You know?
You're alive.
No, they could have taken your life.
I know.
Yeah.
And they threatened that.
Yeah,
They did threaten it, so. And I did bleed quite a bit.
yeah, it's not your money they wanted, it was the place of business.
That's
what
right.
They have insurance.
So, anyway. And by the way, I was on the midnight shift. So, I don't do that anymore.
Lesson learned.
So that's concussions. You like concussions? No. Contusions. Contusions are where you bruise the brain. This is where you can actually have, you know.
So what does it mean displacement or distortion of tissue? Is it like actual severed tissue, or is it just basically moved or repositioned?
Which one are you looking at?
Causes of damage to brain injuries, displacement or distortion of tissue?
Oh, yes. In other words, distortion meaning it moved, and it's no longer at the same spot it was.
Is it permanent, or is that like a concussion? Temporary
Well,
loss of?
in a concussion, it may be temporary. When we get further down, it may not be temporary, it may be permanent.
Further down between contusion and laceration?
Concussion, contusion, and laceration.
All right, so concussion, there can still be displacement or distortion.
So it's contusion, you may get blood in the cerebral spinal fluid. So this is really serious injury. A lot of times with contusions, you may have permanent memory loss. Permanent. Okay. Lacerations, that's where we actually see like Mary Butterfield, where she has a bullet in there. It actually causes permanent damage to the tissue. It may not repair. You may have pressure. I've seen images of, these are really strong. You see, do you remember Steve Martin used to do a stand-up comedy where he had an arrow through his head? You actually see people that have arrows through their head with a laceration. Yeah, I've seen pictures where somebody has a 2x4 in their head or fence post in their head. And problem is they come into the ER, you can cut it down to some extent, but it's still coming out of their head. And they're functional. Don't ask me how. They're functional, but as soon as you remove it,
Right, because they're gonna damage whatever.
it's going to cause more damage.
Right.
And the chances are they may not survive it.
Wasn't there that case of the guy, it was a long time ago, in maybe the 1800s or something, but he got like a pipe through his head,
Mhm.
and then it severed part of his frontal lobes,
Yeah.
and he had like a whole personality change afterwards,
Yeah.
he actually survived.
Yeah, and it happens.
Did he forget who he was? That's why he's only
No, like because the frontal lobe is supposed to like, yeah.
Yeah, the frontal lobe is basically where you think.
Right.
Like,
So then
when
it-
you're thinking about what you're doing.
They were like, oh, he was such a friendly, personable person.
Because
And then
it's
all of a
pressing
sudden
down
he's
the
just
nerve,
so
right?
Yeah.
aggressive, and just like, it was like a whole different person.
So is forced trauma that causes some form of amnesia, is that considered contusion? When
It
it's
can be.
When it's permanent, but can still be jogged to an extent?
Maybe.
Okay.
Okay, and you got to remember when we're talking about, and this is one of those interesting things. This is one of those interesting things that people don't realize. The brain develops very young in life. Like I said, it's the first organ that develops as an embryo. And the way it forms as far as its connections, some of it's related to the genetics, which means from your mother and your father. And some of it, it develops because of outside factors that are happening at the time, whatever they may be. What's being consumed, nutrients, or loss of nutrients. not psychology. It's
Psychology.
No,
It's not
hey,
psychology.
hey, this came out in psychology when I took it.
but it's realistically speaking,
It's one of
what's
the-
happening developmentally.
How would you,
Right, well, I was in lifespan, so like it
Yeah.
talks about the development.
And I never had lifespan, so I don't even know that.
Yes, see, it is psychology.
how would you
It's
classify,
physiology.
how would you classify shaken baby
True
syndrome?
that.
Where,
Shake and bake baby?
yeah, shaken baby syndrome.
Yeah.
So is that like a forced contusion?
Yes, it is. It is.
So it can be blunt force, or it can be
Yes.
like led by an outside.
Yes.
Okay.
Keep in mind,
Who
remember,
does that?
Idiots.
I'm sorry, what were we talking about?
No, she's
Just
shaking.
shaken baby syndrome. Oh, you didn't know? Yeah, it's when like
Because-
a parent or somebody shakes their baby, they can shut up.
because, or a caretaker.
Or caretaker, yeah, usually.
And I
because of
say
postpartum.
caretaker because it could be a babysitter.
Common sense, guys.
Yeah, common sense, but
It's
then
also
again,
common.
Yeah, we had
there's
a-
a lot of people that don't
we
have
had a
common
NICU,
sense, unfortunately.
patient like that.
today.
Now, wait a minute, when
Yes.
you have congenital twins, and they're connected at the head, that's the
sideways.
worst one, right? And,
Yeah, we'll talk about a little bit, so wait with that.
We're like joking out.
What about the?
I'm just trying to get a point of reference for
Remember the like football players that were constantly getting concussions and then it led to brain damage?
Mhm.
Was that from mostly bruising of the brain?
Bruising in the brain. And if you think about it, here's an interesting thing. Anybody play rugby?
Oh, yeah, that's really gross. My stepsister does.
Can't say
She
have.
does?
Yeah, well, she's got a lot of aggression right now.
Okay. Rugby is sort of like football without any
Protection.
Either
gear.
padding or
Yeah.
protection.
I know years ago when I went to a school where they played rugby, they had a cake of beer on the side of the field. So when
Let's stay
they,
hydrated.
yeah, when they actually got injured or anything happened, they take some of that to actually get rid of the pain.
And that's interesting.
Yes, it is. Okay.
I'm guessing that was in college?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
But it was just a fun rugby team.
Increased care pressure
Not
healed.
bad.
So can lacerations be caused by internal bleed, like a
Yeah,
yeah? So hematomas can
hematoma is what, you know.
the internal bleed out.
I mean,
Like if you have
think about it.
hemorrhaging or some sort of an aneurysm.
Yeah, well, aneurysms can also happen. Because remember, what's happening with an aneurysm, you're actually having an artery that is actually bubbling out because of pressure, and the walls of the artery are not actually retaining it. So what happens is it bubbles and then eventually bursts, and then you actually have bleeding. So,
So laceration can be defined as any like
yeah,
increase in
any,
cranial.
this is why I said it could be because of injury, physical trauma. It could be because of chemicals, which means you could actually consume some sort of chemical that's actually causing damage. It could
Genetics.
also be related to things like infection
In the brain.
that could have gotten into the brain for some reason.
Laceration?
And laceration, yes, laceration is basically physical trauma. I mean, think about it, if you actually had an arrow and it went through your head, and there, I've seen images or seen people that have actually tried to commit suicide. They shoot themselves,
Oh, with a bullet
And it-
raises.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen that. We had a client one time, he was raising the gun with his head and it accidentally went off and shot himself in the leg, yeah.
but I'm saying it hits through the brain, or it hits through the head,
Huh?
and causes damage that way.
No, it's one of my clients, I work with mental health.
Oh my goodness.
After you come to football player.
Oh, that idiot, he did something stupid, is that the one who had the firecrackers in his hand or something? Yeah, he like shot himself, he shot himself.
Yeah, he sounds something.
Yeah.
But the issue for the football players,
I
it was
understand.
concussions, not contusions.
Yeah,
Concussions, right?
yeah, concussions, yes,
Concussions.
yes.
But did the concussions lead to contusions? Like,
Sometimes they can, okay? And I want you to realize that even though we're looking at it and breaking it down, even though concussions are the least damaging to the brain, sometimes it actually leads to contusions. In my situation where I had my first concussion, because of the amount of damage, it was close to a contusion. And it actually took me at least 6 months to a year to get back onto my normal speed.
So from
And I was
contusion-
taking courses and dropping them, because I couldn't remember things.
So from contusion to laceration, how would you differentiate that? If they both have bleeding, internal
Yeah.
bleeding. So-
Well, the difference
You
is
don't-
basically the level of trauma. I mean, you think
you
about
have
it,
to have physical
you see physical damage.
damage.
Yeah.
But bruising and contusion wouldn't be considered physical damage.
It may be, but it may not be as severe,
Okay.
okay?
If, like, you give us a scenario to work out and just to differentiate
Yeah.
the two.
So, does that make sense?
Sensory areas.
What do you mean?
The injuries.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. I mean,
Like, it could be
movies
anything.
get very
Literally, it could be anything. You bump into something and like you hit your head and there,
Yeah.
there it goes. You know?
and it does happen that way sometimes. And you know, you don't know. So there are, you know, things that do happen. Okay. You guys are really,
Far behind?
Really
Yeah.
behind or like.
Still behind.
I understand.
I'm
that's
curious
fine.
too, but it's.
I'm
I
just
was
trying to
so
make
curious.
sure, you know, where we,
It's like-
are going. Okay, one of the things that we're gonna see in the cerebrum, we have sensory areas.
I want to know the technique for shaking babies.
Yes. This is all cerebral cortex. Sensory areas we have a number of them. We have, as you'll notice, they're all primary here. Primary somatosensory, primary visual, primary auditory, primary gustatory. Gustatory is taste, auditory is sound, visual is vision, and somatosensory is skeletal muscles. Senses of skeletal muscles. Primary is basically where it goes first. If it says primary.
So is there a secondary as well?
Sometimes there is, okay, where it actually processes the information after it goes to the primary. So the primary, you'll get more of a crude type information, which then gets processed a little bit more later on.
Gustatory is taste, right?
Gustatory is taste, okay? It doesn't mean you have good taste or bad taste, it's just taste, okay?
Where's the smell? Never mind, forget it.
Forget.
Yeah,
Go.
let's just
Just
go
move.
on,
Just
it's
go.
okay, I'm
Motor
sorry.
areas.
I'm
I can see it next.
Basal ganglia area, that area is where it is, okay? So if you're looking at it in this image, you'll see the circles, those are those areas. And the occipital is the visual. I want you to realize that. That's actually where visual is. Most of this blue area, that's somatosensory. In the, so you're noticing it, it's actually getting the information from the thalamus and actually going to these areas, the cerebral cortex. And then it sends it out towards the next processing location. What it means. Somatosensory. I put this on my hand for a skeletal muscle. All right? I feel it there. I feel pressure. I feel there's something there. Do I know what it is?
Yes, a key.
No. Just by feeling it, I may not. Initially. Initially. Okay? Initially. But it goes to other parts of the brain to then process it to identify what it may actually mean. For understanding where it goes further. Okay? So primary, it just identifies something as being identified. Okay? Does that make sense?
So for instance, if the 17,
Yeah, visual,
that area, if
That's-
it's damaged, you're gonna have a vision problem?
yes.
Alright, cool.
So that's why if you actually get hit at the back of the head, occipital region,
Mhm.
or occipital lobe,
Visual line.
chances are there may be problems with the eyesight. I'll give you another thought. A couple
good.
years ago, my wife got glasses recently, okay? She doesn't like to wear her glasses. A few years back, she got glasses. She didn't like to wear her glasses. Her glasses disappeared. Okay? But she was getting headaches. What's the number one thing to go with a headache? That's perpetual vision. Okay? And she was getting headaches at the back of the head. Occipital. Okay? So, I mean, I'm just trying to give you some insight. Okay?
Just think of
I
oculus
do want you
occipital.
to also realize the somatosensory that we see here with, in the blue. Next to it, we're gonna also see, that's where the primary motor areas are.
The red area?
We're gonna see that in a little bit, yes. So, when we look at it, here we go, motor areas. Two primary motor areas, the primary motor area and the Broca's. Primary motor area is where it connects up with the somatosensory to identify what's going on there to actually create muscle activities. Broca's is actually to interpret speech, to determine how to speak. Okay, so let's look at the picture. Red area, primary motor. You see it? The red area, right next to it. One's in the temporal lobe, the other one, or frontal lobe, and the other one's in the parietal lobe, just so you have an idea what we're looking at. So blue is the parietal lobe, and that red area is in the frontal lobe. Okay? Like I said, Broca's is actually related to speech. How to speak. Now, you guys know how to speak, right?
Yeah.
And you move your tongue, you move your throat, and all this area. And I want you to realize it's a lot more complicated than you might think. Okay? So, I'm just telling you that that's one of the things that we see. We also notice if we have the associated areas. Notice we have somatosensory, visual, auditory, gnostic. Gnostic is basically senses and responses to the senses. Premotor for learned or skills. This is fine motor, typing, playing the piano, or other fine motor skills like writing. Okay? And then we also have the frontal eye field. So you have movement of your eyes. A lot of times the associated areas are involved in more complex activities. Taking the information from those primary areas and integrating them into a more complex aspect, into memories, into emotions, into, what does it mean? Let me draw some. Okay, so we got something on the board.
Frontal eye,
What do you see?
pyramid.
Okay. What, how about other people? What does it mean to you?
Triangle.
It means
Strongest
nothing.
shape found in
Science
nature.
has no idea what it means.
Yeah, what is triangle, but what it means to me?
Yeah, what does it mean to you?
A very
Shape.
strong structure.
Strong structure, okay.
Yeah.
But
Strongest one in
I-
nature.
But to me, it could mean a lot of things. It could mean all those things that you just mentioned. It could also mean delta as a Greek letter.
True.
Which means that there's also an impression that in science, a lot of times we use delta for change. So we have association to the different things, which are part of our memory set.
Yeah, but it's not that meaning for me, but we can associate
Yeah,
the
yeah.
to different other things.
I mean, if I drew something a little bit differently, let's say I drew something like this, what does that mean to you?
Can be a flower.
Could be a flower,
Molecule.
okay? Yeah. But it could also mean, if you actually associate with something like Monica mentioned, a flower, it could mean something that there's meaning to it for her. Okay? Whatever that may be. I'm not trying to interpret it in any way, but I just want you to realize that a lot of times it also puts into the whole thing of intelligence and personality aspects. I mean, think of it this way. My son, I keep talking about him because he's full of it. I mean, full of it.
Really?
Yeah. He doesn't want to get in the car seat. He screams and cries and throws his arms and legs. But at other times, he'll go in it, no problem, you know, no big deal.
How do you get it to calm down and get everything?
It's a challenge. That's all I'll say. It's a challenge. And he doesn't say too much. But he demands things. He points and he demands things. Okay? So he's got a personality. Okay? He's got this strong person to talk about tomorrow. Okay? All right? So remember, we're going to get to Asia tomorrow,
Tomorrow, not today.
not today.
Okay, we're done. Sweet.
So